It is the second 2025, and there are very many F1 news and update threads at which we need to pull. We've got to talk about Esteban Ocon's talking about Lewis Hamilton and his first week at Ferrari. The Esteban Ocon was there. Interesting. So too the Johnny Herbert protest issued by Red Bull not long after Christian Horner has told us that Maximilian Verstappen had nothing to do with the stewards sacking. So too JP Montoya talking about Oscar Piastri potentially destroying one Lando Norris if indeed Lando isn't as attentive as he needs to be to win himself a World Drivers' Championship. So too we'll talk about Flexi-wing because Red Bull not pleased again. It's kicking off in real time, is it not? 2025 is here and we have ourselves a fight as much in the political arena, in the F1 stewards room, as on track. How do you like your Formula One? So too we'll talk about Sir Lewis Hamilton, a brilliant podcast, Chris Harris on F1, theorising about what Sir Lewis really wants from his Scuderia Ferrari career. Let's talk about Ocon first. Ocon was there and he said the following around the furore of Sir Lewis Hamilton's first week in a Scuderia Ferrari red car with the yellow badge, atop of which is the black prancing horse. Here's what Esteban Ocon said. I was lucky enough to be in the same place and on the same day because I was also at the simulator at Ferrari, he told Canal Plus. There was a crazy atmosphere there. No kidding, Sherlock. Unprecedented settings. Nearly 5 million likes on Instagram. Mr. Unprecedented, the one that they call Sir Lewis, Carl, Davidson, Hamilton. Ocon continues, and I quote, people were going crazy and it's just magnificent, in fact, to see that there is so much passion for Ferrari and of course Formula One. In the world, it is the sport that is growing all the time. Touche, Esteban Ocon, I agree with you. Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton, as far as marketing potential, brand Hamilton and the symbiosis with Scuderia Ferrari is of course the tide of a rising tide that floats all boats. This is techie. This is marketing wizardry. You can't bottle nor sell this. So Lewis means something a little bit different. And if we're going to get techier than techie things, I may as well tell you this as the first priority order. So listen, I'm going to link this podcast in the description. You'll know Chris Harris from Top Gear, one of the goatiest F1/automotive journos to ever have done it. Sideways Sid. You know that guy that he gets in. He's a serious guy, is Chris Harris, and I enjoy listening to his podcast, Chris Harris on Cars, it is called. I will link it in the description. So they play this funny experiment. They did this thing. They talk, okay, let me take a step back and set the table. Firstly, they talk about the week that was and Sir Lewis's first week at Scuderia Ferrari. And they all chime in saying it was ridiculous. Like they've never seen anything like it in the weird and wacky world that is F1. The pictures were perfectly composed, slightly left-leaning. The pathetic fallacy and symbolism of having the 7 open windows, representative even of the 7 World Championship that Sir Lewis has already won, and the 1 closed door with the Ferrari flag atop of it. Again, symbolic of the fact that there is the unprecedented 8th, the promise that was that Sir Lewis, hopefully in inverted commas for all Sir Lewis Hamilton fans, evangelists, fundamentalists alike all around the world, that Sir Lewis will win in his stint driving for the red team. It was beautiful, the attire, etc. Although they did criticise it, saying that Sir Lewis, one of Chris Harris on Cars Bods, said that Sir Lewis's suit looked a tad oversized, that it looked like your first suit that you wear when you go and defend yourself for the first time in court. His words, not mine, needed to be a little bit tighter, but they were largely eulogising around the event that was Sir Lewis. The composure of the pictures, how well curated Sir Lewis Hamilton's image is, that you can't be more cool than he was in those photos, in the red overalls with the yellow lid. And then they played this game. Really, I wanted to bring it up and go through it, but I couldn't bloody find it. So they played this game. On the panel, there are 4 people. Chris Harris, Manish Pandey is the only other one that I know that's of significance. Manish Pandey, by the way, was the producer, the exec producer, I want to say, of the Senna documentary. Serious guy. They play this game where they say, if Lewis could choose 2 cars, Ferrari cars, 2 for him and 1 for Anthony Hamilton. How would that go? What would he choose? It's a brilliant game, and I was dialed in now. I'm like, ugh, what 2 cars would Lewis buy for himself and 1 for his father? Bearing in mind, Anthony Hamilton, again, it's not dissimilar to Max and Jos, right? But for Anthony, you could argue that Lewis wouldn't be in Formula 1. Anthony Hamilton, father of Lewis, was the guy who worked 1,000 gazillion jobs all at once to fund Lewis Hamilton's career. He was the dude that was knocking in the ground for sale signs with a view to make ends meet, again, to fuel and finance his son's motorsport career. You'll know by now, if you're a serious discerning eye, that the 44 that Lewis drives under comes from Anthony Hamilton's Cavalier once upon a time, a 1989 model. And again, the reg on that was 44, something like F44HAM or something of that ilk. That's where the 44 comes from, and they talk about it on this podcast. Brilliant first couple of weeks, nicely curated marketing. But cut to the chase, Cameron. What were the cars? So Chris Harris and the other colleagues, his co-hosts, talk about, well, maybe he might want a Scuderia for himself. Maybe he might want a Speciale for himself, speculating that Lewis would want to go underneath the radar. 288 GTO settings, maybe. That he wouldn't want to be too obvious driving around Monaco. That he'd want to, you know what I mean? He'd want to be a bit stealthy. And then Manish Pandey, legend of the Senna documentary, chimes in and he said, I really wanted to win this game. So what I did was text Anthony Hamilton, father of Lewis, and ask him if there are 2 cars, Ferrari ones, that Lewis would buy for himself and then 1 that he'd buy for his father. What are those cars? Anthony Hamilton texts Manish Pandey back and he says the following: the 2 that Lewis Hamilton would buy are the ones that he already has. And again, this is the latest and greatest in a litany of things that Lewis will want from Scuderia Ferrari. A stable car, rear stability, front end nosy type. But talking about road cars for a second, a little bit of fun. And I thought it was a brilliant insight. Manish Pandey texts Anthony Hamilton. Anthony Hamilton responds with the following: the 2 cars that Lewis Hamilton would buy from Ferrari are the following: LaFerrari convertible, the Aperta iteration, and a standard LaFerrari, the coupe one. But coincidentally, he already has both of those. And for me, for his father, the car that he would buy would be an F12 TDF. Oh, the humanity. Anthony Hamilton responding to Manish Pandey, telling him what Lewis Hamilton would buy. Proper. Way to stunt on them, Manish Pandey, with your F1 contacts, etc. Oh, and by the way, getting back to F1 news proper, a decent little bit of, I thought that was fascinating. I thought I would share it with you. Herbert protest. So lest we forget, Autosport Awards were last week. Johnny Herbert, around his dismissal the week before, Christian Horner and Zach Brown both said the following: that it was the right thing to do, that you can't be a pundit and a steward. Those 2 are conflict of interest. No, those 2 things need to be mutually exclusive, especially if we're talking about stewards that are impartial and institute for the rules in a way that's fair and consistent across all parties. Now we come to find out, courtesy of several different publications, that Red Bull were instrumental in the dismissal of Johnny Herbert. This report reads as follows. Red Bull were reportedly one of 2 teams who protested against Johnny Herbert's position within the FIA. The 3-time Grand Prix winner was removed from his post as an F1 steward on Wednesday of last week. Herbert's position was placed under the microscope during the second half of 2024 season following a series of penalties for Max Verstappen and a number of outspoken quotes given to the media. He's too aggressive. There's no way he can do that to Lando and Norris. And that was in conjunction, of course, with Damon Hill's talking about dastardly tactics even. That sport doesn't build character, it reveals it. This article continues. GP blog says that Red Bull were one of two teams who protested to the FIA how Herbert was presenting himself to the media. The Brit gave a number of provocative interviews with gambling companies, which was viewed as incompatible with his role as an FIA steward. No kidding, Sherlock. Interesting that. You saw Christian Horner's reaction to Craig Slater's question. That his insinuation was this, that maybe Johnny Herbert's gone because of the beef between him and Max Verstappen. Christian Horner reacted like this. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, Craig Slater? You could see him physically recoil from the very premise of the question, only for us to find out that Red Bull, not Max Verstappen, but Red Bull were instrumental, one of two teams who complained to the FIA about Johnny Herbert, this commercial aspect. It's techie, this. As far as stewards going forward, yeah, full-time ones would be good, but you don't want to hear them vocal in the press and the media, for that in and of itself is a conflict of interest. Epitomised, is it not? Oh, and by the way, Martin Brundle's come out. If we're talking about Lewis Hamilton, Martin Brundle's expressed not concern, but principal point of contention. And I echo these sentiments from legend of Sky Sports F1 and F1 Martin Brundle. He said this: he's got to get out the gate quick in 2025. He's got to do that. He's got to use his experience. There are no excuses at this level for anybody, even the rookies, but you might give the rookies half a season to get their act together maximum. They will expect somebody like Lewis Hamilton to have aced the people around him and the car with 2 or 3 races, to be honest, but never underestimate Sir Lewis Hamilton. Oh, the humanity. As harsh as that sounds, I think that's right. We know already that Ferrari have said that they're going to establish a hierarchy. They don't wish to seize defeat from the Moors, no jaws at victory, particularly at the altar of driver hierarchy and or lack thereof. What they don't want to do is a repetition of McLaren last year, sacrificing wins and silverware because of this egalitarian thing, equal rights. What are we talking about? This is F1. For Pete's sake, there is lap time in being unfair, in prioritising a Lando Norris or prioritising a Sir Lewis or a modern day Jean Alesi in Charles Leclerc. No, Ferrari will realise this as the sand timer has already been turned around on Frederick Vasseur's tenure. Team principals don't last too long at Ferrari, especially if they ain't winning anything. He'll have another couple of years. Ergo, Sir Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc will need to get out the gate quick in 2025 because Ferrari won't hesitate to prioritise one of the drivers. Most coincidentally, the driver that's ahead in the driver's standing as at the Monaco Grand Prix. That's what we know and that's what they will do. And probably, quite rightfully, sadly for Lewis Hamilton, if past his prologue, he's not a quick starter, right? And it would be ironic if in this season, when he's got so many new things to adapt to, when it's Ferrari, it's Maranello, settling into a new home at Milan, that he gets out the gate quick. This would be one of the rare occasions when Sir Lewis gets out the gate quick, normally taking some time to play his way into the crease as far as an F1 season. Oh, and by the way, Oscar Piastri will destroy Lando Norris, says one JP Montoya, legend of Formula 1 back in the day. He says the following, and I quote, "If Norris relaxes and Oscar Piastri gets better, it can destroy Lando Norris. Piastri needs to out-qualify Norris just a couple times to boost his confidence. Norris has better race pace as at February of 2025. But if Piastri can outperform Norris in qualifying and make the strategy of winning the race in his favour, it could get into Norris's head and force him to make mistakes." Oh, the humanity. This is going to be a story that's going to run and run, is it not? Lando versus Oscar. Oh, Gayla, Seven Rivers, help me. Miss RS. I don't know which way this is going to go. Listen, I suspect that Lando will still have enough in his toolbox to beat an onrushing, fire-breathing dragon in Oscar Jack Piastri in 2025. That is because it feels like for Oscar beating that Lando, it's a matter of when, not if, right? Last year was his second season, his sophomore season. He has no experience versus Lando Norris, for whom last season was his 6th. No longer is he a novice or an amateur. You could call that dude a veteran. So what happens when Oscar is in his 6th season and we're doing a like for like, apples for apples comparison? It's going to get techie then for one Lando Norris. He needs to win a championship now, doesn't he? The time is now. The windows of opportunity as far as the WDC, as far as the drivers and constructors to a lesser extent, are fleeting. They will close quickly on Lando Norris. I wouldn't like for him to be another Fernando Plan Alonso. Imagine if in 10 years' time we're looking back at 2024 and saying that sadly for Lando, that was his only opportunity. The 2005 and 2006 for Fernando Alonso, because it wouldn't be the first time. If past his prologue, this wouldn't be an unprecedented circumstance, though Lando wishes for it to be anything but that. Oh, and by the way, got to talk about Flexi-wing, right? Red Bull left furious because the FIA are changing the goalpost. Goalpost creep as far as the regulatory body is concerned, as always. I mean, the story of the Flexi-wing, okay, two things. Looking backwards first, McLaren brought the upgraded front Flexi-wing to Miami and they never looked back since then, right? Probably ostensibly the quickest car on the grid the rest of the season. Lando Norris should have won that Drivers' Championship. If anyone else not named Max Verstappen and or Lewis Hamilton were driving that Red Bull, I mean, you bet your bottom dollar, put the house on Lando Norris. Yeah, he should have won last year, but extraneous circumstances, pressure, underperformance, failure to execute left him wanting, sadly, for the Brit. However, the story that is 2024, you can't tell it without referencing Flexi-wing, can you? Giovanni, you're a legend. Surely the FIA pays and polices the selection and standards of racing stewards, and if not, let's get it done. Standards need to be right. Well, Giovanni, somebody's got to pay for it, eh? This is Mohammed. 40 million is how much the FIA get paid by F1. 40 million. Do you know what I mean? That's the bulk of their fees that are coming in on an annual basis. So what you mean? You mean that you can't afford stewards? You're paying Johnny Herbert peanuts. Do you know what I mean? Expenses, a couple £100 a day. Relative, okay, so that's big money, right? But relative to a F1 driver, an X1, I mean, what are they doing, Giovanni? I agree with your sentiment though, Giovanni. The standards, consistency across Grand Prix as an example. Well, you're just going to have a different set of stewards every single... Listen, I can't. Giovanni, I'm about to go scorched earth here, but I cannot and I will not, I shall not. My emotional bandwidth isn't sufficiently robust on this, the morning of the 2nd of the 2nd, 2025. Right, Flexi-wing. That was the story, the salient point last season. The McLaren wouldn't have been so fast without the Flexi-wing. The story of this rule and reg spec of car is that they need to balance the bloody oversteer on the fast corners with the understeer of the very slow ones. Picture a Maggots and a Beckett. You don't want it to be too front nosy, experiencing therefore by extension instability at the rear. But what you also don't want, picture, I don't know, chicane 1 at Monza, chicane 2 at Monza. There you're going to need a lot of downforce to turn the nose in right. What they'd been experiencing most of the cars up and down the grid by dint of the symbiosis that is the ground effect with the very mercurial tyres that they're racing on currently is, of course, snap oversteer on the quick turns and then understeer on the slow ones. Lest we forget Maximilian Verstappen saying I'm -5 on brake bias and the car still won't fudging turn. You remember that. This is it. Lewis Hamilton too. Why are we so unstable at the rear? This is it's the automotive pugilistic Rubik's Cube for which they all need to solve 2025. Now, McLaren found a way by dint of Rob Marshall's genius using the Flexi-wing. Yeah, your Venturi tunnels are good, but if you tack on this Jekyll and Hyde of a wing that comes into play nicely in the braking zone at a chicane 1 at the Italian Grand Prix as an example, but backs off during the quick stuff, Maggots, Beckett, Spa, Eau Rouge, Radillon, etc., then you have the perfect symbiosis, right? That's the equation. Because you've got a car that's different in different circumstances. This is double diffuser settings. This is active suspension. You want a car in an ideal world that doesn't infringe upon the rules and the regs, but can act in different ways. You want it to be super slippery, sans drag on the straights and the quick turns. And then all of a sudden you want all of the downforce to kick in on the low speed, medium duration turns. Rascasse, Chicane 1, Italian Grand Prix. That's what McLaren managed to do by dint of Rob Marshall's genius and that front wing. Now, all of the teams cottoned on. Last year, they couldn't do it. Red Bull didn't have the financial resources. Again, front and centre of the mind, not infringing upon the cost cap again. What they couldn't have, no, didn't want, is another Max Verstappen championship that had an asterisk on it. Max Verstappen, if rumour is to be believed, already has 1 foot out the door. You don't want to expedite for that process by putting another asterisk. Oh, Red Bull. Many naysayers will always say, and still will say, Red Bull are cheaters, inertial valve, fiddle brake, etc. 2021, Michael Massey, they race hard, they get in the face. This will be this black cloud for naysayers, detractors of Max Verstappen and Red Bull isn't going to go away anytime soon. And there is some validity in that argument though. Red Bull race hard, they are line steppers by definition. You see all the activities and sports that they're extreme sports that they do outside of F1. It's not their strategic objective as much as it's their modus operandi. It's the way they go about their business now. Cameron, you are telling me there isn't any money in the pot. Come on, no, Giovanni, that's not what I'm saying. Of course, I'm telling you there's money in the pot. But Mohammed Ben Sulayem doesn't want to spend it. He has a president's fund of 1.5 million, using which he's going to make sure that he leverages influence over those who are voting for him for the president of the FI in December of this year. I agree with you, Giovanni. I think you're making the point. It's Mohammed Ben Sulayem that's saying that we haven't got the money. The drivers need to pay for it. Something, by the way, that Zach Brown agrees with. What do we do? Listen, but there's a reason why Zach Brown's saying that. I tell you what. Do your own research, do your due diligence, understand the owners, the majority shareholders, who they are of McLaren F1 in 2025. And that tells you all you need to know. Zach Brown's never going to come out and say anything that different to what Mohammed Ben Sulayem's saying. He cannot, he would be mismanaging his key stakeholders and their expectations. Therefore, but I digress. Flexi-wing. 2024 we've covered. 2025, here's what's going to happen. Everybody's going to be in the off season. Everybody would realize two things. Mini DRS at the back, if you can do it and get away with it, tick, 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 because there is lap time and durable competitive advantage therefore in that. They will be building that in. So too Flexi-wing. Red Bull couldn't do it last year for there were lack of financial resources, cost cap, etc. Now, however, in the off-season, do not think that they won't be throwing material resources at that. Why? Because there is material lap time and therefore durable competitive advantage in that wing. If your Venturi tunnels are designed by Adrian Newey many cycles ago, and then you add to that a Flexi-wing, oh, the humanity, it's perfection. You completely erode and erase all of Max Verstappen's complaints almost instantaneously around the car not being able to turn in. Oh, and by the way, as far as this rule and reg spec of car, ground effect Venturi tunnels, that's where most of the downforce comes on. You will be aware that as a percentage of the whole, most of the lap time is lost where? On these low minimum speed turns, medium to long duration. Rascasse. If you can't turn in, then you are fudged. Therefore, that's why this will be first order priority on all of the teams' list. Flexi-wing. This is the battleground upon which the 2025 championships, both drivers and constructors, will be fought. Rules and regs are there to be navigated into. Very well said, Giovanni. Too kind as always. As an architect, I do this on a daily basis. The team engineers, a duty to get to great. I don't disagree with you, Giovanni. You've nailed the point there. This is F1, and we wouldn't want it to be all nice. It wouldn't be F1 if it wasn't that. If there was the oldest truism in F1 history is that these guys are always looking for the nooks and crannies, right? Finding a rule to exploit. Adrian Newey, the rules and regs. Read them once per Ross Brawn to find out what they say, and read them a second time to find out what they do not say, with a view to exploit that there Ross Brawn 2009, Adrian Newey 2000, or 1993 even, active suspension, Colin Chapman back in the day with the skirts on the first set of ground effects. Always been the way. I listened to a story, again, it was a podcast. I listened to so many that I can't remember which one. There's a story, I think, about Colin Chapman where they were trying to find out how has he got so much downforce in that car? Is he using a fan? All the while it was skirts, by the way, on the Lotus 72 or whatever. And each and every single time they got to they'd pull the car into the garage, they'd have one guy take a box and run from the garage back to the motorhome with a view to distract the other teams and make them think that they had this magic concoction in this car. All the while it was just the bloody skirts that was yielding the god tier like downforce. And this is, I agree with Giovanni, this is what it needs to be with F1. But therefore you need a strong regulatory body, sans regulatory capture et al, to police this then. And this is what Red Bull are complaining about. How very dare you, FIA, say that the load test is fine. Tom Biasi said the load test is cool if the wings are flexing but they pass the load test. Nothing to see here. One of these. Okay, Red Bull said, all right, then that's fine. But no, we're going to build one of those between now and next year. For 2025, we're going to have all the Flexi-wings, all the mini DRS, if indeed you're telling us they're allowed. But the FIA have done what the FIA do so brilliantly and so frequently. And they've done one of these. U-turn 180 settings. Well, the Flexi-wing, if it passes the load test, but it's not within the flex on the outboard portion of the Flexi-wing is not within 12 millimeters now, as opposed to 15 before, then it's now outside of the circumference of the rules and regs. Out of line, you can't use it. Same thing on the inboard. Was 5 millimeters the margin of error and flex, now is 3. How can they do that? We haven't even turned the wheel for 2025 and the FIA adjusting the rules. You had all those, how many months has it been? Nearly 2 months since we've turned the wheel in anger. And only now the FIA are iterating for the rules. Telling people that, and the joke is you can start, they know that they've done wrong, the FIA. Because you can start the season at Australia in a couple of months' time with the Flexi-wing, with the 15 millimeter tolerance and the 5 millimeter tolerance outboard and inboard respectively, if I recall correctly. At Spain, however, you're going to have to now go and re-engineer your Flexi-wings. What do we do? Honestly, the FIA beggars belief that we're in $1 billion sport. Bloody Nori, you've seen Lewis Hamilton and Symbiosis. This is crazy money. It's a serious thing. And we have Mickey Mouse and his mates at the FIA as the regulatory body. I mean, this is not commensurate, right? There's a mismatch here between theory and practice. And I just don't understand it. It beggars belief. They need to sort this out. I don't know what the outcome looks like. I don't understand. I'm not there yet. My mind is too B-spec. My sight too short. But they've got to do something. Maybe the F1 breaks away and does its own thing. But 40 million plus to the FIA for this nonsense. I mean, yeah, you guys make it sense. According to Auto Racer, the FIA's Flexi front wing clampdown has left Red Bull furious, having begged the governing body to act amid. This makes it worse, right? Red Bull were begging the FIA to clamp down on this Flexi wing that McLaren leveraged so effectively to their own benefit, won the Constructors' Championship because of it, very nearly won a Drivers' Championship because of it, all the while Lando Norris has a Flexi-wing and mini DRS and Maximilian Verstappen has nothing of the sort. Can you imagine? Normalise for that thing and tell me about Maximilian Verstappen and who he is as a driver, please. Okay, so he had the quickest car, like 1.5 of 7 or whatever. The first 7, he had advantage at the start, but how about H2? Normalise for that and tell, stop glazing Max Verstappen, Cameron, you're such a I saw somebody in the comments, you know what, as we ran third base, Rafa, those numbers won't make a difference. You don't think so, Rafa? The 5 and the 3, the 5 and the 3, so the inboard portion, 5 millimeters to 3 millimeters, that's material as a percentage of the whole. It's nearly 50%. No, Rafa. The outboard is less. The outboard was 15 millimeters worth of flex. Now it's 13. So, okay, you can argue that's, but listen, in a story told intent, I think all of it makes a difference, Rafa. You can still flex as long as it doesn't bend more than stipulated. But that's what I'm saying, Rafa. You can still bend, but less. So it's a difference in extents and not kinds, right? And all of these numbers matter, Rafa. It's F1. Oh my God, I'm in. Good evening. No, you're a legend, Miss RS. Jeannie, morning, just popped in. Sunday, bloody Nora, I can't believe it's Sunday. I don't know where I am. But yeah, no, I think Red Bull for once are quite right to feel aggrieved, having begged the FIA to get rid of this Flexi-wing, to institute for different load tests. All the while the FIA were doing one of these, oh, no, we're not going to, if it passed the load test, then we're, if it passed the load test, then it was within the rules. They said they weren't going to change the load test on a gazillion occasions, and now they've changed the load test. What, so you couldn't change the load test last year? This smacks of, when we talked about 2021 and the agency that was at play then. Everyone said, oh, they wanted Max Verstappen. The only colour that matters in Formula One is green. Full stop. New paragraph. Always has been and always will be. Of course they weren't going to, if they want, look, people would have dialed out in their droves at H2 as soon as you were halfway through. Imagine Miami, Max Verstappen keeps winning and winning and winning, and we have another season in 24 like we had in 2023, where it's just Max Verstappen domination, monopoly. The viewing figures would have done one of these, right? Everybody would have sacked off the season completely. So therefore, the F1 and the FIA, the FOM in particular, commercial rights holder of Formula One, needed to make sure it was a competitive drivers' championship for as long as possible. They needed somebody, Lando Norris in this case, to keep Max Verstappen honest, lest they wanted for their viewing figures and so their bottom line to do one of these. It is that simple. No more complicated than that. Seven Rivers, Red Bull with asymmetric braking, cricket. Seven Rivers. So go on, let's address this Seven Rivers as if I haven't addressed it. I hear the contention, and we talked about it earlier on in the season. However, truth, value, and objectivity, right? If you look at the evidence, and in a way that's true and fair and as objective as possible, it makes sense, right, that Red Bull fell off. Potentially there was something at play there, that they took something away from Red Bull and that was driving the drop off. However, when you look at Mark Hughes' analysis, I think he did it best. If something was taken away from Red Bull, you would anticipate all the other 9 teams to catch up, right, Seven Rivers. That the delta, let's look at super times, because that's probably the most accurate. Super times being how close or far away each of the teams are from the fastest lap set over the course of a weekend. The super times, the delta between Red Bull and the rest was level largely. If you imagine, if feeder brake was a thing, Seven Rivers, then you'd imagine that the gap would close up between Red Bull and the other 9 teams, right? That's not what happened. After Miami, wherever they said the feeder brake did get to, yeah, maybe it did. I'm not close enough to the circumstance. But if you imagine it was a feeder brake or an inertia valve, then the gap would have closed between Red Bull and the rest, not Red Bull and McLaren and Mercedes. That's what happened. When you look at the super times, it was only Mercedes and McLaren that closed the gap on Red Bull. If it were the feeder brake, you'd imagine that it would be Red Bull and the others, all of the other 9 teams. It would have been convergent settings. McLaren with the Flexi, no, well, they had to let them go, didn't they? Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bills. And this is why Red Bull are not pleased. This is why, imagine Lando Norris goes and wins the Drivers' Championship, and we're talking about Flexi-wing, like the rules and regs is 15 to 13 millimeters on the outboard portion of the Flexi-wing, and then it's like 5 to 3 millimeters on the inboard portion of the Flex. What are we doing here? Now you go and change the rules retrospectively. Can you imagine the controversy if they've done that only after Lando Norris had won the Drivers' Championship? They're lucky that McLaren only won the Constructors, I'm telling you, because the F1 community it would be 2021 all over again. Polemic, controversy. But again, that is the story that is F1 now. Is now and has always been. I'm going to run. Aaron, what's Aaron saying? Even before this Me Too moment. What are you alluding to, Aaron? To what are you alluding, sir? Remco, MBS's blight on F1. No, they've got to sort it out, haven't they, Remco? It's not good enough. 4 stewards per race. Assume 8 across the season, 200k each, 1.6 million. I mean, it's not a big... In the grand scheme of things, when you know how much money goes into and comes out of F1. I mean, just look at how much money they pushed into developing Las Vegas and infrastructure around there. I mean, a couple million a year. I think they'd have to pay them more than 200k. But like, even if it total bill, let's say the total bill over the course of the year was like 3 or 4 million. Well, you're telling me that F1 and FIA can't afford that? Mate, I don't know. What are we doing here with F1? You guys have been legends. I'm going to go and run and be a father and a husband for a little bit. We reconvene. We ride once again at 8 p.m. tonight, where, as always, we'll be discussing all things Formula One, news, updates, etc., etc. Between now and then, the prosecution rests no further questions.